It is stream time. Lego. Let's do a study. Let's chill out and do a study. I got an image right here. But I don't want to paint all that, so I may want to just do like a little chunk of it. So maybe something like that. Maybe like that. Might be nice. Would be cool. So maybe to make that easier, we'll just do that, right? That seems like a pretty good composition, or we do it on this side. So to be honest, I'm not really sure. But this will make it easier to figure out where do we want to create our composition and where do you want to do a study, because I only have an hour, so hopefully this will make it a little bit easier to kind of make that judgment call. So there you go. So if I move around here, maybe I make it even smaller, but I kind of like these like things going on right here. So maybe I'll do that instead. So let me just zoom out here. So we have that. And then we can decide on whether we want to color pick or not color pick. And I'm on the voting of maybe color picking today. So what we'll do is we'll just get a few of the values that we want, that we think we're going to need. And then we'll kind of just create our own from there. So, but plus there's no guarantee we're gonna stick to that color palette. We just want to know what the values are at different spaces. So like, what is it, you know, when it's in the foreground? What is it when it's in the midground? So we'll just take a few of these colors, the colors that I think that are important, and then we will work from there. So that's a good important color. And then we'll take the snow and then that. All right, everything else I feel like we can figure it out on our own. So there you go. So again, it's up to you on whether or not, whenever you do these, like if you want to color pick or not. I don't think it's the end of the world if you want to. It just depends what you're focusing on. So if you're trying to focus on more like the texture part of it, like understanding like the brushwork, then maybe, you know, not having to worry about color picking every single time is for you. So it's up to you, just as long as you're upfront about it. Like, you got to set the perimeters of what you're trying to achieve in a study. So I think for me, I want to focus more on like texture and stuff, so I've been doing a lot more studies. Yeah, you dig? So if we do that, what I want to do is establish some lines real quick, and that will make it easier to kind of figure out the perspective, all that kind of stuff. So actually, in my older piece, to kind of show that off, not show it off, but was it this one? Yeah, so when I did this one, the same thing. What's important actually is this. It's that. It's kind of figuring out that that lay of the land, and if I can figure out those parts first, then it becomes like relatively easy to do. So that's actually what I do first. What I'm drawing is like figuring out that part in terms of how I'm gonna lay it out. So let's see if we can do the same thing here. It doesn't matter what colors you pick per se. It's more so about just understanding like the overall form. There you go. Let's move this over a little bit more. We could move this a little bit more upward. Yeah, there you go. So for me, what I want to do is I want to like get these angles figured out like right away. So, and you know, this will probably help me understand where things are kind of overlapping. So then right there, I would want to like make a line straight up, because there is clearly some kind of forms happening there, and I don't have to be exact here, but I do want to. I want the lines to kind of help me figure out a lot of the proportions that I may not have already. So, I mean, you can, I mean, this could actually just be a straight line if I wanted to, but for the sake of argument, sometimes it's nice to kind of be a little bit more exact when you're doing this stuff. Yeah, so I'm just trying to get that overlap to show that, hey, this is like kind of behind it, because that's going to be important later on. And it doesn't really matter like where you start either. It's a personal preference thing at that point. So that kind of goes into a nice angle. This kind of goes, dent, dent, dent. So it kind of has that ridge. So I just want to make sure that I meet that in a nicer area. So I actually don't like that. So I actually may change this and kind of just go straight. Just because I feel like it may be easier. And then once I get that line, then I can do that part. So by drawing it, by kind of overlapping it or drawing it in two different forms, it may help fix that issue. Because this one goes pretty steep. So there we go. And then we'll erase from that. And then it looks like there's like some kind of hills going on here. This part, I'm not gonna get too worried about it, and like, but I do, like I already know that that's gonna be pretty subjective. Like I'm gonna probably mess that part up. And the next part is figuring out this guy right here. So I'm just gonna make that like a block, because I know that's just gonna be, that's just a block of trees. That's all that I'm gonna leave for that one. And then looks like there's some bumps here and there that I'm gonna need to kind of show for kind of overlapping purposes. So it's kind of a flat landscape, but there you go. And then we can, there's definitely some kind of lighting cues we can use here. So cool. Might want to go a tad bit lower. And yeah, now we can figure out this whole situation. So that kind of goes around. That's pretty much like a block. So like how you want to block stuff in is totally up to you. It's just more so for you to have a good frame of reference of what you want to draw. Like, so I know that those are trees, even though like they look like kind of stupid. So like that's not too bad. Cool. And then there's a mountain back here, and I don't think I need to spend too much time on that, because that's gonna be probably the last thing I deal with. But I do at some point probably want to like figure that out. Cool. So now that we have that, we can probably start to kind of block it in just a little bit. So let's see what we got going on here. Not bad. Not bad. So I can lower that opacity now, and now I can maybe kind of work on some layers here. So looks like, and that's totally up to you, like how much texture and stuff you want to put in there in the beginning. So maybe like once I kind of get this stuff in here, I'll go in there and I'll probably get like a stamp texture here. There you go, like this one, and I might kind of touch it across a couple of times like that. Whoops. And you can see it begins to kind of create a little bit of like a softer edge or something. It's just stuff like that. Nothing too crazy. And or it will allow you to erase. So I messed up there because I don't have it on rotation. So we'll turn that on. And then now if I kind of do that a little bit, it can create a little bit of that kind of texture, that dry brush kind of feel that we're looking for. And then I can go back if I need to and kind of get some of that soft stuff going on here. But when you want to do that is completely up to you. So it's Mr. Corey. What up, dude? I always miss your stream. Anyway, to submit my work for when do I get to doing critiques? Wait, what? Write that again? I don't think you wrote that correctly. To submit my work for when... Oh, yes. I always miss your... Wait. I always miss your stream. Anyway, to submit my work for when you do get to doing critiques. Okay, rewrite that again. This time with some punctuation so I can understand what you meant by that. And then I will try to answer your question accordingly. But I think you're asking for critiques, right? I don't think that's what you're going for, but I could be wrong. And I don't want to assume. Anyways, let's get some of these things figured out. And I'm going to draw through this, even though we don't necessarily see it. I'm going to draw through it because you never know when if you want to erase from it or something, that you might keep something in front of it. So there we go. I'm going to go ahead and put the snow in, actually. But because it's already kind of the same color as that part right here, and you can't see it, I'm just like, well, you know what? Let me just make it the shadow version of the snow, and then that would actually just solve my problem. Yes, so let me go on my other screen here and create a Dropbox link, and then we will get it going to submit critiques. Okay, sound good? And I shall do that right about now. Let me just block all this in first before, because we can start now. It's a feedback Tuesday. You know how we do. So Dropbox. Let me sign in on my other screen. Sign in. So just give me a second as I am currently logging into my other Dropbox. And files. File requests. Feedback Thursday. Request files, change to file request. There we go, choose folder. That work. Set an expiration date, next. And we're gonna copy that. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do is, oh, we're already here. I will put that right there, and I'll put it also in the chat right there. So cool. So that way, if you are looking for feedback, you can drop a file in there and then just message me when you have put it in there, and then I will see it and we'll take a look. And just make sure, since you're probably the only person submitting today, just have something prepared in which you can speak about the piece in terms of things that are giving you issues or things you're trying to work on, so that way I can try to at least objectively problem solve as much as possible. Okay, cool. too much about that part. Not a bad lighting scheme, to be honest. Could be worse. All right, this ting, that's what I got right there. Boom, it was added. And Mr. Corey Lee is throwing in some things up in this. What do we got going here? Mr. Corey Lee, and the place to be. Interesting. So what we're gonna do a couple things here. We're gonna do a couple things. Let's see here. Okay. And then we're gonna put that behind it. There we go. And we'll put that behind it. Oh, come on, sample that color. What are you doing? All right. Next thing, I want to make sure it's the proper height here. Okay, cool. So that means that I need to put a little separation here. So what's on your mind, dude? What's going on over here? So we're gonna take a look at these guys. So the issue I have, that's what Corey's saying, is I usually tend to work, I try to take things further. I tend to work away zoomed out and then try to detail seems so chaotic. I don't know how to describe it, like random, not defined. Okay. So that might be a lack of layering and a lack of form, if I had to guess. So let's just kind of maybe go through how I would probably organize it, and then we can just kind of go from there. So this is probably where layers, I think, really help you in this regard, because the more layers that you have, then I feel like it's easier to make changes. So that's relatively the same height. You know, actually, you know what I'm going to do? To make my life easier, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. And this is how I'm going to cheat. I'm going to get the proportions exactly how you laid them out. So boom, 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 boom. And then we're gonna lay that out. Okay, so I'm just gonna jack your proportions here. And hopefully this will make it a little bit easier than to, it's like you have some sky volumes there. Cool. So then all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to drag that down. See? So now I already know that's way too high. Boom. Just like that. All right. So we have that. Let's begin to kind of lay out these forms here. So you have this big form right here. And we'll just kind of block that in accordingly. So, I mean, this is kind of how I mostly start when I'm doing things, is I'm pretty graphic with it. Just because I want to just give myself a fighting chance, like, in terms of not kind of building up the painting as best as possible. So we'll put this here. So I would probably separate this into a couple different things here. So like this one's probably fine. This layer right here. But because of the overwhelming kind of overlap, I might separate that like into a couple of different layers. So I might make one more layer just for the background. This will make it a little bit easier then to kind of put atmosphere in there. So I'm gonna make that a little bit lighter just so we can see it. because then it makes it way easier to kind of have those games of like putting in like, you know, snow or like, you know, mist, the kind of fog, that kind of stuff. So that's all I'm kind of doing there, by the way. We'll just go like a shade bit lighter. And then eventually I'll probably like kind of merge it all down. So there we go. And then in front of this guy, we'll just kind of have this detail here. So normally, like if you're having trouble with like the overall detail, I feel like it's probably like a lack of form that's happening. You're not understanding like you're not understanding the forms very well, and so you're trying to guess, and you're probably trying to guess with texture, and that can be kind of a very risky thing, because if it doesn't work out, then you're kind of messed with like kind of a jumbled kind of texture thing, and we don't want that if we can avoid it. So that's kind of like my layering. And to be honest, I would probably separate this too, because it's kind of like its own separate form. So maybe I will do that. I'll probably just grab like a little bit of a darker value here. And I'm just gonna say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna put this on its own thing here. So there we go. And then I can erase wherever I need. So once I get things where I want them to be, like just the basic kind of, you know, light and shadow, then, or the basic values, I guess is probably the best way to think about it. That's when I feel like I can begin to kind of mess with edges. And so that's kind of a shape thing. So I want to make sure the shapes are like as strong as possible before I start messing with the edges. And I'll show you what I mean. So like, once I kind of break this down right here, let's say that I like this stuff right here, then I can begin to kind of erase with the texture brush. And now you can kind of see by me erasing with it, all this kind of texture that we're getting that would be kind of hard to do if you didn't have it already kind of like blocked out the way you'd want it. So I'm creating texture subtractively. So we want to find out ways that you want to figure out if you're doing texture additively or subtractively. So subtractively means that I'm putting down a hard shape like that, and then I'm just kind of erasing the edge to kind of create a little bit of that texture. So it's subtractive texturing. Additive texturing would be the other way, where if I use the same brush and now I'm adding texture the other way, just like that. So establishing which way you want to texture is important to me, I think, like when you're doing this stuff. And it's important to kind of stay consistent with it, because it will give more unity in your piece a little bit. So right now I'm preferring to do a little bit more of a subtractive kind of texturing method. But the most important thing though was that I got those shapes kind of laid out as early as possible. So now that I do that, I can begin to kind of just, I can work from the front to the back or the back to the front. It doesn't really matter. For me, I'll probably just work from the back. And so I can begin to kind of just mess around with some of that layering. I don't want the edges to be too much of the same. I do want there to be a little bit of like a texture or a gradation, stuff like that. So if I do that, this stuff right here, I'll probably begin to kind of put in those shadows. And so I'd probably use the same brush right now. So, or actually, you know what? We can use a texture brush if you're feeling confident in something. This is when you can kind of use brushes like these. These are like John Park's brushes that kind of have a little bit of a texture to it. And you begin to kind of sculpt out those details. And this is where I might kind of start throwing around a little bit more of the blending brush to kind of figure out some of those things as well. So let's just say that we kind of like this kind of texture here. Eventually what makes this nice is that I can lock that transparency. So now I can't paint outside of it, and that's actually super helpful to me. We can use lines here to kind of figure out the lay of the land as well. And at any point in time, if I feel like it's not, what I'm drawing is not kind of fitting the actual like contour, then I can turn the masking back off. and then I can begin to kind of add those shapes in there. So hopefully you can kind of see where that texture is coming from. You have a lot of stuff right there, but I think the important part is to get the overall shape down first. Then you can go in and you can kind of go with your heart's content of doing all these kind of small little texture things, you know, something like that. Now the meta of this is to do it all on a different layer. So I'll show you what I mean here of why this is like probably a smarter way to kind of work. And let's actually kind of, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change up the silhouette here. I'm trying to just match it as much as possible to what you have. At least like get the idea of it. Okay, so let's just say I like that. And in my head, what you probably should be doing is making lines. So I made another layer. I'm gonna make this red just so like you can see it. And you want to have lines that will help figure out the contour, right? The lay of the land. So these lines right here are gonna make it very, very easy to get that flow down that you're kind of having. And so if you don't have these little lines right here, like at least you're seeing it in your head, you're probably more times than not gonna have problems because you gotta kind of see those lines that kind of flow correctly. Yeah. So it's important that in your head you're seeing those angles correctly, and you're reading you're kind of like reading the painting. I don't want to say reading the game because it's not a game. Well, I guess it is a game, but like kind of like a sports, like you kind of you're reading the game. You want to make sure you have those reads going down properly. So that's on our own layer right there. So now that I have that, and it kind of provides with texture in a way as well. So technically now that I have that, it should be easier to go in there and throw down some lines like that. Because of the fact that I have taken the time to really understand the contour. I'm not guessing anymore, and that's a really important thing here. And so when you don't have to guess, you can obviously figure out that how much easier this whole situation is. And you're trying to kind of do it in like one stroke if you can. If you're trying to go for that kind of painterly look, you want to do it in like in one stroke. So there we go. Now I can erase where I need. Okay, you can see all that. And we have that. So actually, like, this shape actually doesn't make much sense to me because of the fact that it's like not going the right way. Okay, so there we go. Oh, my wife is home. All right, so now that we have all that, and looks like I need to probably make a different stroke right there. So this is probably actually what should be happening, based off of your lines, right? Something like that. Okay, so we're in a pretty decent place. The reason why you want to keep the shadows like separately, at least in the beginning, is then it becomes a lot easier to texture. So now if I want to go in there, on the actual layer itself, I can go in here and let's say I want to use a mountain stamp, something like that, right? See that? I can go in there, I can throw in all that texture, and it's a lot easier to deal with. So I can go back to this brush, and if I want to, I can now kind of paint it out. I can now even use different brushes that have different kinds of texture, all that stuff to my heart's content, because it's all kind of separated. You can kind of see that. And then on the layer itself, I can even throw in like reflective light now. So this is me right here throwing in reflective light. Hello. What's going on? Come here. There's no camera. You can give me. Oh, you're gonna cook? Alright, what you gonna make? Parmesan. Alrighty. Alright, love you. The lady's gonna make me some Parmesan. Right. What package? No, there was no Lulu's package to my knowledge. So, now that we have that, we can now begin to kind of erase. Did you just check after I told you that you didn't have it? Yep. I just told you she didn't come in. You're silly. Alright. That's a wife for you right there. I told her no, and then she checked anyway. Anyways, let's see here. So we have that. We have the shapes going right there. There's all kinds of things happening there. So I feel like that has a lot more of like a nicer feel to it. And again, we can kind of go back and forth. So now if I want to like get some of these angles and like press super hard, you know, I can now do that because it's all separated. And then once you get to a point where like maybe you feel like you want to get rid of all that stuff, well then you just merge it down. So you don't have to always keep that layer, but I think in the beginning it's good to have because it forces you to kind of really take your time with things. So hopefully like that makes a little bit of sense. So now I merged it down and now I'm kind of just like stamping here and there, like little things that I think will help kind of just give the piece a little bit more kind of a nicer look, a little more of a textury kind of look, like that. And then once you get all that going, then it just becomes a game of adding some soft noise, you know what I mean? Some soft noise that can help kind of just kind of push it back a little bit so that it doesn't stand out too much. So you're adding a little bit of that soft noise, and then you can kind of, you can kind of render that all day long, to be honest. There isn't really a right or wrong answer, but that's kind of the process, is that you don't have to have a lot of layers, but the way that you're painting, you kind of need to paint as if you do, in my opinion. I think that's probably like the one thing that's kind of stopping you from getting that detail, is because you're probably doing a thing where you're constantly painting over stuff like left and right, and then you're having to kind of like fix what you just painted over because somehow whatever you painted over like messed up the original silhouette. I don't know if you ever have that problem, but that happens to me. So now I don't have to necessarily worry about that stuff. I can go to the next thing, and because I already had this foundation kind of built out, I can begin to kind of take chances. So maybe this one I don't use the layering. I just kind of just paint it as I see it, and hopefully it kind of works out. And so I go, hey, you know what? I'm hoping that instead this just works out for me, that the shadows and everything look nice, and we just call it a day. And because it's further away, maybe I don't want to like add too much detail in there. So instead, maybe I do end up picking a regular brush, right? Maybe I do end up taking a brush like this that has a little bit of that strokey kind of feel to it. And that's nice because that can be helpful in terms of making it feel like it's a brush stroke, because it has those soft properties in there that are really, really nice. And it looks like you have some things here that are kind of simulating like mountain texture, so we can play with that too. And we just go back to our texture brush. And however you want to do that, it's up to you. See? And then I'll go back to this brush right here, and it's all about those angles, right? You can see how I'm trying to kind of just get little angles, and I'm trying to just imply things. I'm trying to imply a lot of detail here. I don't want to sit there and spend too much stuff, like too much time, because it's not needed, because it's in the background. So Ironically, like background stuff is the least detailed, but I feel like it's like the hardest sometimes because trying to figure out like how to imply detail with something that's in the background is like super difficult to do it in a way that like feels cohesive to the whole environment and feels like juicy is a hard thing. It's a hard thing to kind of fake detail, especially like in background elements. Because like it's almost like this thing where like you have to kind of act like you're not trying. If that makes sense. Like so I painted on the wrong layer that whole time, so I guess we'll just merge that one down because I'm an idiot. And we'll just keep those two together. Cool. Yeah, so it's all about kind of like making it seem like you're not trying by like not painting all this detail, but it still has to be like super thought out. I don't know any other way to kind of explain it, or at least how I kind of feel about it. So this kind of stuff like has to really kind of be thought out when you're doing it. So what's up, Darnell? So then as we get back here, maybe we just want like a few values, right? Something, just a couple of small little hints to kind of indicate that there is some stuff going on here, but not really. So this might be like a one stroke kind of situation. So knowing what your brushes do, and so what you said was very interesting. You said you only use one brush for the airbrush. That's fine. But like you said, if you're looking to kind of get to the next level of detail, well, then that's when you're gonna have to start opening up your tools a little bit, your bag of tricks. And so my brushes are pretty limited though. I've only used a couple just for now, that mountain stamp texture and whatever. So, but that came from like good practice, and then also just knowing what I'm trying to achieve with the brushes and what brush can kind of get me there a little bit faster. So we have that. So there we go. Now we go back to that soft noise brush, and so that brush is going to help kind of push this thing back a little bit to where I want it. And so then there we go. So that might be the texture that you're looking for. And so you just slowly kind of begin to kind of work your way from the back to the front in terms of like where you want things to go. And that's pretty much it. Like I wish there was like some more profound thing to kind of talk about, but where the style comes in is like where you choose to kind of put detail and stuff, or like what brushes you choose to use, because there really isn't like a right or wrong brush. It's mostly a style preference at that point. So here I gotta review the lay of the land, so I got to figure out where that's kind of going. So this is where lines can really help out, because it really helps you figure out those angles. And like I said, it's a game of angles. If you don't have those angles like figured out, it doesn't really matter what brush you use, it's still gonna look kind of jank, a little bit weird. So I'm just trying to kind of break through here. And notice that I'm always trying to kind of draw through the piece a little bit, meaning that I'm always trying to kind of like make the marks like very, I guess fast, I guess is the way you can think about it, is I'm trying to kind of paint with intent here. And Darnell will kind of know will kind of back me up, I would hope, in terms of this idea of painting with intent. Really thinking about each stroke that you're making. I'm really trying to be very cautious about not noodling when I'm putting stuff down here. And so the more that you can break down like the basic forms, the more confidence you'll get when it comes to actually like painting in detail and stuff like that. So usually what happens is the lack of form or the lack of detail is because you don't know what the forms look like, because you're probably making it up in your head. And then that leads to you, and if you don't have like simple shapes, if you can't break these down into simple kind of geometric shapes, you're gonna hit more problems because you're gonna be guessing a lot. And so I guess the best way to think about painting with intent is not guessing, is really understanding what the forms are doing, breaking them down into really simple forms, the more you can do that, the easier your life will be. You won't be kind of like, is this the right, like, does this look right? You'll know right away because you have all the information already kind of broken down for you. So that's what we're kind of looking for, yeah? All right, what's up, Woo? That's what we're looking for here. And so I'm putting these little sharp, kind of darker lines down because I'm hoping that that's going to help kind of, I'm hoping that what it's going to do is it's going to figure out some of the forms here. And now that we have all that kind of broken down, we can begin to kind of throw in some texture if we need. So I have like a texture brush here that I might be able to use. I'm not sure. Soft noise. Did I lose my texture that I made? That's lame. Hold on a second. Let me go to brushes, updated. Lotus tools. Why is it not there? I just made a soft texture brush and I don't know where it's at now. Oh. Well, it's right here, I guess. That's weird. It didn't save it. That's done. So what I'm hoping to do here, by the way, is I'm hoping to kind of just merge those two down a little bit. So I'm hoping that as this will make a little bit of noise, a little bit of that texture that we're looking for. But that's actually probably too much. So that brush actually did not help me in that situation. So we'll actually go back to this normal stuff. So we'll go back here. I'm just sampling here. And I'm just hoping that there's a nice kind of blend with the background and stuff. Because we don't want that to kind of be like too much of a separation there. So what I could even do now actually is I could actually maybe just like extend this canvas like that. I could actually kind of paint more over it, but at that point I don't think it really matters. So we're just kind of following the lay of the land here. I'm just taking the values that you have and I'm just trying to find those correct angles. Like I'm trying to think about like why is this in mid-tone and why would this be in like shadow kind of situation? Like where are the mid-tones, where are the shadows, where are going to be the cast shadows from this light? So a lot of this stuff like needs to be figured out like right away. And I can kind of tell this area you got a little bit lost in because you weren't really understanding the lighting. And so it's hard for me to even do it because I'm kind of like trying to figure this out myself because I'm like, wait a minute, like why would that be in light if the light's coming from across this way? And it's kind of a huge shadow. Like how far in front of that is that thing, like in general. So now I'm guessing, and that's not a good thing. So this thing right here, I imagine, I mean, if the light is really kind of coming from there, this would be relatively bright, which is kind of cool actually. Like I dig it. But then you gotta figure out like the form there. So we can use that as kind of a block in for now, and then we can go back to the ground. It's not bad. It's like not the worst, but okay. Hopefully that makes sense on like what we were trying to achieve there. Actually, I'm going to use the noise texture. What am I doing? And what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to actually make it a separate layer. So that way I don't have to sit here and deal with this nonsense. There we go. And at any point in time, if I'm getting confused or maybe having trouble, it's kind of nice to jump around a little bit. So I'm gonna jump around. So what I'm doing here is I'm like, well, what if I go work on something else? And then that will give you some time to kind of think about you know, how I want to actually attack that problem. And the problem is this kind of mid-ground area right here, and then nothing really leading us out there. So that's probably the first problem. The second problem is this issue right here of this rock. So this is where lines can really help out. So I would want to go in there, and I would want to, in a way, think of it as like two planes, and this is where perspective comes in. And so it's probably safe to assume we didn't use a perspective grid here. And so that's probably the second issue that's going to happen, because then this is a pretty complex geometric shape. I mean, it's not that complex, but it's complex enough where we have to kind of figure out which way things are going and which kind of coordinate system. Like, is it going in the x-axis, the z-axis, the y-axis, like that kind of stuff. So we have to really kind of think about that stuff. So let me I have to invert these values now, because I'm an idiot. Sample it. Thank you. Boom. All right. So we have to really kind of like draw those lines and figure out like where those things are. Like, where do these things kind of cut into? Because if it does, so let's say like if we're going to draw a line right there, you know, that's going to create a cast shadow, you know? It's going to do one of these numbers where it goes boom, boom. So we got to figure out all those things like as we're going, and that can kind of be a pain if you don't have it already figured out. So that's like my 2 cents to you on how to do it. And to be perfectly clear too, when I'm doing like paintings like these and I don't like it, I'll start completely over and I'll do it again. Like, and I might do a painting like 3 or 4 times before like the one that I actually kind of like show off is like the one that, you know, everyone gets to see. So if you're having trouble with the painting and maybe it's not going where you want to go, you can't be afraid to kind of sit there and say, you know what, like to do the same painting over and over again until you get it right. It's kind of like taking like a 3-point shot from the same spot, and you're gonna miss, and you're gonna keep probably taking that same shot from the exact same spot until you get it where you want it to be. It's kind of the same thing. So don't be afraid to kind of sit here and do the same painting with the same basic composition over and over again until you feel like you're in a place where now you feel confident about it and now you can execute the painting as best as possible. So that's kind of like my next thing, is that like I would probably do this painting like at least 3 or 4 times, because I know it can be better just by looking at it. Like, it's a cool idea, but there's a lot of things that like could be better, and I don't know what the exact solution is in my head at this particular time. But I know by doing it over and over again, chances are each time I'll find something like better that I can improve on, and then I'll do that. So that's kind of an important thing on why like you'd want to keep pushing it, yeah? So like I would go in there and, you know, I'll explore with texture, I'll explore with brushes. And so a good example of that is like this painting. I did this painting at least like 3 or 4 times before I actually like posted it. And each time was like, I was trying to figure some shit out. Like each time I got caught up with like the right texture, the right brushes, the right perspective. Each time I messed up. So just know that you're never gonna do something. I mean, you could, like in theory, you could do something like one time and just kill it. Those people are freaking inhuman, and I'm not one of those people. So if you're already having problems, like it's okay to do a painting like this, knowing that like you know it's not perfect and you're gonna have to redo it and try again. And each time you're gonna probably kind of roll the dice and be like, okay, what if I try this brush, or what if I try this perspective? Or what if I try like to kind of achieve this texture, if that makes sense, yeah? So just kind of explore more a little bit and take your time, like don't rush it. The piece feels very rushed and it doesn't feel like there's much intent there. And I think that's probably like the main issue that I'm seeing is like there's a lack of intent with the drawing, and that's a very easy way for it to kind of look not amateurish, but like not hitting your full potential. Okay. So like even like this, like the part that actually drives me the most insane is this thing, because I can tell like there is no like thought process whatsoever in terms of like the overall form. So like in my head I'm like what is going on here? So there should be like some really nice kind of like lines that are happening here that will make this piece feel like super juicy and whatnot, and we kind of like miss the mark on all of them. Like this whole piece right here like feels like super off. So that's when it's like there's a lack of perspective, there's a lack of like intent, there's it's lacking a lot of things that is like that could make this piece look a lot cooler. And so you were asking where you get John Park's brushes. You just gotta probably download them off his Gumroad. I think he has like a free one, or like you can buy them with tutorials and they come with them. So to answer that question, so like if you're struggling with your foreground, chances are like you're struggling with it because there's no perspective, like there's no forms here whatsoever. And so that's where perspective becomes super, super important here, because you have to be able to kind of understand the basic form. So like in my head, as I'm drawing that, I'm already like in my head breaking down that this is a plane right here. This is a plane and it's going in this direction, and then it's going down in that direction like that. And maybe it's going up in this direction right here. And so understanding those contours is really, really important. And so then I go, okay, you know what? Well, maybe we're seeing the top of this plane like right here. And maybe that's one whole plane and it's going down in that direction. So if you can't like see this already, like when you're drawing stuff, then you're gonna have problems, because you're never going to your stuff is always gonna be kind of lacking a little bit. So make sure that you're breaking down those planes a lot more in your head. Like this should be kind of like constantly in your head about what you're seeing. So like right here, I'm like, oh, you know what? Like that's probably a plane right there. It's facing a certain angle. So the same way that I did those planes right there is the same way that I break down the planes right here. That's why when I drew this thing, and you can kind of see it, these planes are the same exact thing. I'm establishing what's the top, and then like what's the side, what will be kind of negative space, aka like the shadow side, right? I can understand like the plane is going from here to here, and then from there to there. So in your head, you should at least try to take educated guesses on where the planes are going. You're not always going to get it right, but you can't completely ignore it. If you completely ignore it, then like it's always gonna look muddy like that, and it's gonna look crappy. Like you're gonna be unhappy with it every single time, and you're gonna be forced to guess, and you don't want to guess. Darnell said, when you paint the foreground, it forces you to have good perspective, or it does not look right. Yeah, exactly. So that's where you really have to think about this kind of stuff as you're doing it. So like really take your time. Really break down these planes. And so that's where like simple shapes, people that have taken my class before, like Darnell will kind of preach about, will back me up on that, is that I always kind of tell you is that like everything can kind of fit into a box, cylinder, cone, and sphere. And that's really is true. So if you can break things down to kind of like these simple shapes, then it will make it a little bit easier to then draw complex forms on top of it. And so that's where like you really gotta take your time and really break these things down. Because all these mountains are, when you really think about them, is they're just boxes tilted on their side. Like, it's just a box on its side. That's all it is. And it's going into the ground, so you can't see like the other part of it. Does that make sense? Like, that's all mountains are, is they're just boxes like that on its side. And you're just combining these boxes in interesting ways. So this is a box right here. And maybe this box comes into that box right here. Like, you know, that kind of thing. and then maybe draw another box, and maybe this box, like the angle is like super thin. And then maybe this box is like right here. Maybe this box is kind of facing more towards us, like that. So in your head, you should be trying to kind of like figure out how to break that stuff down in perspective. And if you can do that, then it will make it a little bit easier to kind of like, I guess the right word is kind of like take educated guesses and like fake things, where like you can fake the lighting and you can fake the texture where it looks like you really spent time on it but you didn't. That stuff will help you get there a lot faster. Okay, so with only 3 minutes left, does that make sense? My wife is making me some dinner and it smells good. I'm not gonna lie, low-key excited because I've been working out before I started this. Okay, so we'll do some, maybe we can talk about more of this on next Tuesday and stuff like that. Give you guys a heads up, I am doing another Gumroad talking about Mixer and that kind of stuff. I'm trying to get that done this weekend. And then I will have a free video for you guys on my birthday, which is the 21st of December. So I will have some free content for you guys to download, and I'll probably be doing some content where I talk about this kind of stuff, and where I paint in general, where I just kind of do a study or something like that. Okay. So thank you guys for all coming through. I really appreciate it. Looks like we have a decent amount of people from over on the Facebook and the YouTube, and looks like mostly Facebook. So 21st. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, dude. Your 21st, your 23rd of December. That sucks. I thought I had it bad. Being, just so you know, why it sucks is because when you're born in December, you get one gift. You don't get 2 gifts. It sucks ass. So I'm sorry to hear that. If you want to talk about it sometime privately, let me know. But yeah, shout outs to all my December birthdays that get 1 present. You know, I see you. Do your thing. But in the meantime, y'all take care. And if you have any questions or things that you want to have me talk about in the next stream, let me know, and we'll go from there. In the meantime, thank y'all for coming. I'll hit end stream so we can render the video out. And remember that you can always watch these videos too on my Facebook or on my YouTube. So if you missed it now, you can always watch it later, and you'll you know, if you want something on while you're painting. Yeah. All right, cool. Happy therapy session. All right. Stop barking, Toby. Relax. Well, I guess he's saying let's go. All right, thank you guys so much. Take care, and I'll see you guys when I see you, all right? Peace.